Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Up first, the flooding in Libya has killed at least 5,000 people, with the number expected to grow. We'll speak with a BC man who was born and raised in Darna. And Vancouver City Council hikes short-term rental license fees nearly 10 times to $1,000. What do you think of that? Councillor Sarah Kirby-Young will join us. We'll end the show with music education. What difference has learning music made for you? I'm Michelle Eliot. Welcome to BC Today. Thank you for joining us on CBC Radio 1, live streaming on CBC Gem, cbc.ca/BC, and on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. Our top story now. Officials fear that the devastating flood in Libya may have killed as many as 20,000 people. A powerful storm burst dams on Sunday night, washing away 25% of the infrastructure in the city of Darna, according to officials. The city's mayor says thousands of people have been swept out to sea. And a pressing challenge is locating and burying the bodies fast enough. The disaster comes following years of political division in Libya that has played a role in leaving residents particularly vulnerable to the effects of the storm. I'm joined now by a British Columbian with roots in Darna. Dr. Abdulrahim Huwaidi, is a clinical psychologist who was born and raised in Darna and moved to Coquitlam as an adult. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Huwaidi.
Good afternoon to you, and thank you for having me. Thank you for reaching out.
Well, thank you very much for agreeing to join us during this difficult time. I mean, the destruction is staggering, right? Seeing the rubble and the rushing waters and overturned cars, and of course the bodies that have been retrieved. It's heartbreaking. How are you doing?
Well, as well as could be expected. Obviously, this is a time of mourning. Some mourning that a person could deal with and could accept, and that's the mourning that the loss of loved ones, of family members and neighbors and friends. But also, in fact, there is another mourning for a lot of us who, like you said, have roots in Darna, and that is the mourning of a loss of a town. And to tell you the truth, I never knew that term or this meaning until this experience, which started for us and started to unfold 3 days or 4 days ago. Mourning the loss of a town is something that's extremely painful. It's a new experience, and it's an overwhelming experience. Obviously, when you add to it the loss of, like I said, friends, of family members and neighbors, it's painful, but we're getting a lot of support, and we will survive, obviously.
For yourself, you have lost family and friends there?
Yes, I have. Not first-degree relatives, but definitely close relatives, cousins, and their families. All segments of society, including my relatives, children, elderly, men, women. It's just an incredible experience, and it came. And these kind of experiences, it's very, very difficult to prepare for them. It was totally unexpected, although there was a little bit of a warning, but still shocking nevertheless. And the people that I've been talking to in the past couple of days, I tell you, there's so much shock and so much trauma going on in the society, and definitely so much mourning. And some people are really just lost. And obviously, there are a lot of practical issues at hand that you mentioned at the top of this interview, and that is, getting the bodies out. And in the first couple of days, we were thinking a couple of thousand people, but now there is fear that the number of people who have departed will actually exceed 20,000, unfortunately.
Yeah. I'm so sorry for your loss. And as you said, you are mourning this loss of the town that you grew up in. And when was the last time you were in Darna?
Last time wasn't long ago. It was this past winter. We haven't lived in Derna since 1976. Derna is the city I was born in the late 50s and grew up in. And it's quite a unique town, very, very distinct in relation to our country, Libya. It's an ancient town, in fact, rooted in ancient civilizations such as the Roman, the Greek, definitely the Islamic civilization, have all been passed through Derna and formed a melting pot that created a unique culture known for its philosophy, the arts, its distinct cuisine, its distinct plantations. I could not forget this time now that's approaching. In fact, it's very much related to the flooding because pomegranates in Derna grow up in the Wadi, which is the name of the river that sort of splits the town in two halves. Uh, some very, very unique flavors and tastes and smells, and obviously the Mediterranean, where we grew up swimming at. So it's a town definitely, like I said, I haven't seen in a few months, but it's in my heart and it's in my mind, and I know it street by street. And unfortunately, it's no longer. It's not there. What they call the area that's been described as affected, they call it the old town. Well, for me, that is Darna, because the old town that's where we grew in. That's the only Darna I knew, and that's where all the families of Darna grow in and raise their kids, and it's such a deep story, and it's right now it's a story of mourning and of loss. But I always remind myself also we will have to find an opportunity for hope.
You talked about the tasks at hand. Given the political divisions in Libya, that is currently hampering, aid and rescue efforts. What is needed now, do you think, for the immediate future and to look at rebuilding this town you so love?
Yes. Well, unfortunately, one could see the floodings, and what could immediately come to mind is that this is a natural disaster or natural catastrophe, and it is so in part. But the political divisions and the political struggle of Libya and Libyans for the past 50 or 60 years have included so much neglect for the infrastructure and for the development and maintenance of towns and other things like the economy, the healthcare system, and everything. So it's actually been, unfortunately, a country and a society living in chaos for many years, to the extent that chaos became the norm. Right now, there is definitely hope, and many people have been speaking about this, that this crisis, that this trauma may hopefully lead to maybe a shift in the thinking and in the behavior of Libyan leaders and politicians and people who are in positions of power and decision-making capacity. That's something that we definitely hope for. But also the tasks at hand certainly require international help. And there have been calls for countries in neighboring Libya, as well as friends of Libya, and definitely, certainly including Canada, where there's also a large Libyan community in Vancouver and the rest of Canada. We need the involvement and we need the help of our friends because there are a lot of expertise that are required for the healing, the immediate healing and the immediate tasks at hand, as well as for the rebuilding of Derna and other neighboring towns. Maybe one thing I could immediately think of is people could contact and look up the Libyan Red Crescent Society. They've been receiving calls and offers of help and aid, so that's one source. And maybe people could also contact their representative in parliament, and whether in Ottawa or in Victoria, and maybe they could lobby for proper relations with Libya and for proper aid to the right hands. But certainly, this is a time where Libya needs its friend throughout the world. And hopefully, the same way that the Libyan society has contributed, in fact, to too many societies when they were in help, there is certainly an expectation that Friends of Libya will come through at this time to help us, because this is something that certainly Libyan people cannot do it alone.
For yourself, Dr. Huwaiti, what's next for you as you witness and mourn this catastrophe?
I tell you, I keep hoping for retirement, and I've been calling myself retired for a couple of years. But apparently it's not in the cards yet. I am heading to Libya in a couple of days, and definitely going to get together with the colleagues that I know, and we're looking forward to obviously helping within our professional capacity, because there's just so much suffering and so much hurt and so much pain, and people are calling for help and they need the help. So I'm hoping to
You're a
set up camp.
psychologist.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
You talked about the trauma, and certainly we have seen that on the faces of people there. Dr. Huwaiti, all the best to you in your travels. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I appreciate it.
Thank you for reaching out. I appreciate it as well. And hopefully things will move to the right direction.
Dr. Abdulrahim Huwaiti is a psychologist who was born and raised in Derna in Libya. He now lives in Coquitlam. We reached him in Geneva. It's 12:18 now, 1:18 in the Mountain Time Zone. You're with BC Today here on CBC. We are on Radio 1, 88.1 FM in Vancouver. You can also watch us live streaming. We're on cbc.ca/BC. You can use the CBC Gem app, or you can find us on YouTube. Just search CBC Vancouver. Well, to a local story now. Vancouver City Council has approved a swath of new fee hikes for the new year. Now, those include a range of licenses, including for businesses or for owning a dog. One of the most notable fee increases, though, are those for short-term rentals and their licenses, which include postings on Airbnb and Vrbo. Now, those costs will jump from $109 to $1,000. That's an increase of over 800%. We're going to be joined by Vancouver City Councillor Sarah Kirby-Young in just a moment. And we're asking you on the open line, what do you think of that increase for licensing for short-term rentals? And would you like to see a similar policy in your city? Do you think this is fair for those who would like to use the short-term rental service for their places? You can give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can also hit pound 690 on your cell phone. By email, you can reach us, bctoday@cbc.ca. And joining us for more now is Sarah Kirby-Young, Vancouver City Councillor and a member of the Vancouver ABC Party. Hello, good afternoon, Councillor.
Hi, good afternoon.
Thank you very much for joining us. What is the rationale for this particular license to be quite significant?
Yeah, so this was a discussion that we had at council yesterday with respects to the short-term rental fees, and what we're seeing is increased pressure on local housing. It's incredibly challenging from an affordability perspective and just an availability perspective to find somewhere to live. And we continue to see troublesome activity with respects to illegal use of short-term rentals. And so this was an amendment brought to the report by my colleague, Councillor Joe, to increase the fee, and really to show that we're taking this seriously and that local housing should be first and foremost for locals. I should say this is different parts of a puzzle, because it's not going to be one thing alone. We know that we're expecting provincial legislation to come forward in the fall that will allow more powers for enforcement. But this was felt that this was an action that we could take at City Council now at the time of year when we normally do look to make any fee adjustments.
And how do you know that how do you know the extent of the problem of illegal Airbnbs?
Well, counselors continue to receive just huge volumes of correspondence and communication about this with concerns where we're getting sort of emails daily that show from locals that show examples of listings that don't have a license attached to them, that clearly look like it appears to be one individual that's operating multiple units. And remember, it's supposed to be your primary residence only, because we are trying
Right.
to prevent local homes from becoming commodities. And so this is something that we hear about clearly. But I should say, when I said it's pieces of a puzzle, yesterday we also had a motion I brought forward about trying to address the dire shortage of hotel rooms in our city. And that's a problem too that really compounds sort of the impact on local housing, because when we don't have enough hotel rooms, what we're hearing is the demand's going to exceed supply by 2026. That's pretty frightening and pretty concerning. We know that puts even more pressure on short-term or on local housing and makes it more attractive for people that are trying to short-term rental and make it a business, and that's not what it should be.
Okay, so is the purpose of increasing these fees in particular, is it about adding to, city revenue and avoiding more increases to property taxes, which is what we've heard about with regard to the swath of fee increases that we saw, or is it about deterring those short-term rentals that don't fit into the description or the requirements of the city?
Well, there's a couple things here. So the overall fee report that council got was about what we heard when we go out and we do pretty extensive surveying around the budget, is that people want us to keep property taxes reasonable, and they would prefer to see an increase in fees for specific services they use than to see higher increases in property taxes. So that's part of it. And then within the report, raising the short-term rental license fee more significantly than the other fees will allow additional resources to support enforcement activities. And so there's a couple of factors working together there.
Okay, so both things. And we did speak with City Councillor Adrienne Carr on the early edition this morning. She was asked how many staff currently are devoted to that enforcement or do that enforcement work. And she's just gotten back to us with that information. And she notes that eight staff positions, which include a property inspector and 6 enforcement staff, do the work of the enforcement. And that's according to the City of Vancouver and Councillor Adrienne Carr. How much more do you think you need? How many more enforcement officers would this money go to?
Well, it's not just about staff. Some of it is technology. Right now, we're receiving data from Airbnb, and they do voluntarily provide us with data, but we're not interfacing with that data. So there's a lot of ways to be more efficient and sort of double check licenses against if they have a valid City of Vancouver business license, for example. Part of it is going to be the regulation, so better powers that we're expecting the province to give us when that legislation comes down. And then certainly staffing plays a role. I think one good kind of parallel example to think about is the empty homes tax, or EHT, in the City of Vancouver. And as that increased, we certainly did put more of those resources into audits and compliance and checking there. And so that's certainly definitely what we're looking at here. Part of it could be technology, part of it may be staff, and part of it will be the city's legal ability to crack down on those folks that are breaking the rules.
Okay, let's take a call now as we ask you, what do you think of the increase for licensing for short-term rentals? City of Vancouver will bring that in for next year, increasing the fee from $109 to $1,000. Part of it is to do with adding to city revenue and avoiding those increases to property taxes, but also to deal with illegal short-term rentals, and enforcement of that, as you just heard from my guest, City Councillor Sarah Kirby-Young. We'd like to hear from you. What do you think of these increases? What about in your city? Is this a problem? Would you like to see these kinds of increases as well? Or do you think these are too much? I'd like to hear from you. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. Janie is calling us now from Vancouver. Hi, Janie. What do you think of these increases?
I'm shocked by them, quite frankly. I'm shocked. I think that it's a gouge, and the people it will hurt most are those that are doing the Airbnbs out of their home, and they're needing extra income in order to float the costs of their homes. It's not easy to be a homeowner in Vancouver these days, and I doubt it will be in the future. And for those that want to share their home as a short-term rental, then that makes it even more difficult for those who are perhaps needing the money from the short-term rentals the most.
And is this something
I
that
think
affects
it's
you
wrong.
then?
It indirectly affects me in that my children are leaving, and I was considering doing short-term rentals. Long-term rentals were not an option in my situation because I would be using the space for family and personal use part of the year. So long-term rental would not be something that I would be considering for my needs. And I also think that the long-term rentals for those not even using the property themselves or the space themselves for part of the year, it's something to really consider whether you do it or not, because of the freeze on what you can increase by, and also on the difficulty of getting renters out if you decide that you'd like to change renters or you would like to use the space for yourself. I know there's a problem, but there's a problem on both sides, both for those that have property that might be available for part of the year and for those that are needing full-time rental facilities.
Okay.
Yeah.
Janie, thank you.
That's my comment.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving us a call, Janie.
You're welcome.
Let's go back
Bye-bye.
to bye-bye, our councillor, guest city councillor Sarah Kirby-Young. And so here you have someone who wouldn't be contributing to housing stock, long-term housing stock anyway, because she feels dissuaded, but was considering short-term rentals, but says these fee hikes are a gouge. I mean, for homeowners who are already struggling, as we see, increases in interest rates and all of that, and just the housing market and mortgage payments here in the city of Vancouver, for those already struggling, how can they afford this increase of more than 800%? Councillor Kirby-Young.
Yeah, I think Janie described a lot of the challenges that we have with trying to encourage longer term rental in the city, whether it's the rent caps and some of the concerns that people have around just becoming a landlord, and that's a huge issue. What we're trying to do here is really discourage the bad actors. It doesn't sound like she's become a host yet, but I think it is important to point out that the affordability challenge is really real. Vancouver also has the highest hotel rates in the country. So when you have, Airbnb rates that are going at conservatively $300, $400, $500 a night, you're really only short-term renting for a couple of nights to cover that license fee. And again, this goes to support enforcement so that there is a level playing field for legitimate hosts like Janie that would like potentially to rent out space that they have. And it sounds like, if you're going to become an empty nester, then that's definitely an option. It's also more ideal, honestly, if we can get some of that space, if people have additional suites, like a basement suite or others, back into the long-term rental market so that there's a home for somebody that's actually living here. Okay,
but as she said, she would not consider it for other reasons.
Yeah, and so that's one of the challenges as well in terms of working on policy, because people are dissuaded for a number of reasons, but we also want to make sure that we have a legitimate short-term rental market here. And Vancouver's fees are, if you look at what's happening in New York, where they're literally trying to shut down short-term rental, Quebec has been a much stronger regulatory response. So Vancouver's, I think, is pretty mild. I appreciate the comments around the affordability piece, but there's definitely revenue for people that out there, for people that need to make it to support themselves from an affordability perspective.
Vancouver City Councillor Sarah Kirby-Young is my guest as we ask for your reaction to City Council approving a swath of new fee hikes for the new year. But one of the most notable is those for licenses for short-term rentals, going from $109 currently to $1,000. And we're asking for your reaction to that. CBC also reached out to Airbnb about these fee hikes. And part of what they said was, quote, "With a primary residence restriction already in place, this dramatic and unnecessary fee increase hurts regular Vancouver citizens who are trying to make ends meet in an already expensive city to live in." Some more emails here from our listeners and audience as well. Dave writes from Campbell River, "With the city of Vancouver raising fees to have a rental property, don't they understand the owner will only raise the rents charged, adding to an already out of control inflation problem? Maybe the governments should look at the greed factor associated with rentals and new housing overall." And Lisa writes, I support it because of all the rental shortage. I know a number of folks who rent out Airbnb rooms and make from $250 to $360 a night, and that they have been full most of the year. Compared to what they make, I think it's reasonable when we think of all the folks that can't find a place to live and rent. Thank you very much, Lisa and Dave, for your comments. bctoday@cbc.ca is our email address. Our phone numbers are 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 as well. We'll take more of your calls with City Councillor Sarah Kirby-Young. That's coming up after this CBC News Update with Robert Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. Czech News is reporting the man charged with a triple stabbing in Vancouver's Chinatown last weekend was deemed a significant threat by BC's review board. Even so, Blair Donnelly was given an unescorted day pass from his psychiatric hospital. The 64-year-old was originally put into care after fatally stabbing his daughter in Kitimat back in 2006. Police say a girl in Surrey was one of the victims of a sexual predator in England. The 29-year-old British man has been given a 32-year sentence for the rape and sexual assault of young girls. Investigators say the man groomed the girls online, including a 12-year-old from Surrey. And a youth has been arrested after allegedly attacking a Sikh high school student in Kelowna. Police say the 17-year-old victim was assaulted and bear sprayed while trying to return home from Rutland Secondary on Monday. The World Sikh Organization has condemned the attack. And now the forecast on the North Coast, mainly cloudy this afternoon with strong winds and a high of 17. Highs up to 21 with local smoke and sunshine in the Peace. In the central interior, sunny and smoky with a high of 21 as well. Highs up to 27 degrees with sunshine in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, sunny with a high of 26. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria and the Fraser Valley, mainly sunny this afternoon with highs up to 26 inland. I'll have more local news at the top of the hour. Now back to Michelle with BC Today.
Thank you, Rob. That's Robert Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Welcome back. You're with BC Today here on CBC. On radio at 88.1 FM in Metro Vancouver. You can find us online too, live streaming at cbc.ca/BC. You can use the CBC Gem app, or you can find us on YouTube. Welcome to you watching us there. We're at CBC Vancouver. I'm Michelle Eliot. Thanks so much for being with us this afternoon. And we have been taking your calls on a fee hike that's coming in the city of Vancouver for those who use short-term rentals and for those who are renting out their homes using short-term rental services. And that fee will go from $109 to $1,000, an increase of over 800%. Taking your calls and your reaction. What do you think of that increase? And is it fair? Would you like to see a similar increase where you live in your part of the province? 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 or email us bctoday@cbc.ca. I'm joined by Sarah Kirby-Young, a Vancouver City Councillor and member of Vancouver ABC. And Fiona is joining us from Vancouver. What do you think of these fee hikes, Fiona?
Hi there. You know, I am so welcoming these fee hikes. I am a renter in Vancouver and returned to Vancouver from Barcelona in 2022, and it was so difficult to find a rental. One of my colleagues actually suggested I look into somebody he knew who had an Airbnb, and it was $300 a night. And I said, there's zero chance of me trying to get that. And I lucked out. But, you know, this is so necessary because there are so many illegal Airbnbs around. I know from trying to find an apartment here from abroad. And I can tell you the same thing happened in Barcelona. None of the local residents can find rental suites now because they're all Airbnb'd for tourism, and it's happening here more and more. And when you're I was a former homeowner here, and when you're a homeowner charging $300 a night for a suite, you cannot complain about giving $1,000 to the city of Vancouver for that privilege. I mean, it's just what they did in Barcelona is they started looking online and finding all the Airbnbs and then going and ticketing them. And I think that's one way to police it quite easily.
Okay. Fiona, thank you very much for the call. That's Fiona in Vancouver saying, she had a lot of trouble finding a long-term rental, sees examples of illegal Airbnbs around, and that has contributed to the problem. What is the hope here, Councillor Kirby-Young? What is the hope from these fee increases then?
The hope here is that we're really trying to shift the balance and have people think twice that with short-term rental, it is meant to be an affordability helper. We do limit in Vancouver your right to short-term rent to your principal residence, and that's not what's happening. We're seeing the commoditization where you have multiple units, incredibly expensive rates, and people that literally have hundreds of people deep that are lining up trying to find a place to live, and they can't find one. And we have a less than 1% vacancy rate. And so it is becoming more financially attractive for somebody to short-term rent than it is to actually lease out that space. And I hear tons of stories from people that say this over and over again. And from other folks, they're like, no, I can make more money just short-term renting than I can renting out a space. And so that's really the hope here, is that we're trying to shift that balance back between housing for locals. And that's why I mentioned earlier that we also had a motion about looking to build new hotel rooms because we have such a shortage. And that's when you see the pressure put in turn on the local housing market.
Ryan sent us an email and he writes, it should be even higher, but 1,000 is a reasonable start. I hope Victoria follows suit. Let's take another call now. Janice is joining us from Vancouver. Hi, Janice. Welcome to the show. What do you think of this increase?
Hi. Thank you so much for the discussion. I just wanted to kind of share my ideas. Number one, I think the 1,000 rate would be quite reasonable for someone who is always Airbnb their place. But I'm just calling to kind of share my thoughts as a landlord. I had the option to Airbnb my place, but we decided, because of the shortage in the market, to rent it out to a family with kids. But now we're facing this situation where they've brought in more occupants. And now we're not protected as we should be as landlords. So I think the next step forward would be to place, options for the landlord so that they can also feel fully protected.
Okay, interesting. That kind of goes back to our first caller who earlier had said she decided not to go into long-term rentals because of, a number of reasons. One of them being what to do when you come up with encounter issues with your tenant. And so you did not want to do short-term rentals then, Janice, or you wanted to contribute to the housing stock, the long-term housing stock in Vancouver?
Yeah, I just wanted to I noticed there are a lot of families are struggling with finding the right place, and we decided we're not going to Airbnb and instead just rent it out to a family. But now we're facing the consequences, and we don't feel protected as landlords.
And is this something that you're able to bring to the residential tenancy board?
Absolutely, but it's in the process. I'm not sure where that's going to go, but just the whole process is quite frustrating and time-consuming.
Thank you so much, Janice, for the call and the point that you make. Councillor Kirby-Young, you talked earlier about, trying to increase the long-term rental housing stock. What are ways to address that by making it more attractive for long-term rental landlords and ensuring that the process for them is not onerous, as she said, and not frustrating, that they have those kinds of protections? Is that part of the puzzle, as you were talking about?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And a lot of what Janice is describing, first of all, I love that Janice actually, kind of made that decision and choice to try to really contribute and rent out the place. I'm sorry that she has had a challenging experience. And that's part of the issue. A lot of what she's describing is fits really more within the power of the provincial government versus the city. But what we hear a lot is, because the frustration is real, and we hear from it from locals as councillors, is that it's really difficult when your rent was capped and you can't increase it more than 2%, for example, and yet landlords are facing the same costs in terms of their insurance, property taxes, everything else going, heating, hydro, et cetera, everything else going up significantly more than that with the inflationary pressures that we are seeing. And I know that we've seen some movement recently with the province announcing they're allowing a higher increase, but that's a big part of it. And then having that right balance again between protecting tenants and protecting landlords, because if somebody has one bad experience like Janice, then they may not want to rent again. And that's what we want to avoid.
Okay. Councillor Kirby-Young, thank you very much for your time. We'll continue to follow this story.
Thanks for having me.
And take care.
You
That's
too.
Sarah Kirby-Young, Vancouver City Councillor and member of the Vancouver ABC Party. This is BC Today here on CBC. I'm Michelle Eliot. Thank you so much for joining us. You can find us at 88.1 FM on radio, and of course you can watch us on live stream as well. We are live streaming online, cbc.ca/BC. You can use the CBC Gem app, and you can also find us on YouTube. We're at CBC Vancouver. Thanks so much for joining us. We are going to talk about music education now. And we mentioned it earlier as we started the program. We got this email right away from Robert. I just want to read it as we talk about the value of music education. And Robert writes, I am a retired music specialist who taught music in BC public schools for 39 and a half years. When scientists measure brainwave activity while people are participating in a musical activity with others, be it in a choral or instrumental ensemble, they have found that it is the only activity when the entire brain is activated. Music is the ultimate brain food. Lovely sentiment there, Robert. Thank you very much. Music is the ultimate brain food. Well, yes, students are back in school, and these days, though, it does seem that music programs are often at risk of being cut from the curriculum. Those who participate argue music programs are important, and we are talking about that today with the Vancouver musical ensemble Saxophilia. We'd like to hear from you as well. What difference has learning music made for you? What instrument do you play yourself? And you can give us a call. Let us know. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can also hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Our email, like Robert, you can email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. Saxophilia is a Vancouver-based quartet founded in 1996. Their members are active in Vancouver's music community. They play everything from classical to jazz to pop. And their second album is out this week. It's called Metamorphosis, on Redshift Records tomorrow. And tomorrow night at 7:30, they'll play at the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra School of Music's Pyatt Hall. I'm joined now by two members. Colin McDonald plays baritone saxophone, and Chris Coughlin plays alto saxophone. Hello to you both. Thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon.
Very good to have you. This is one of those topics that inspires real passion among our listeners, as you just heard from that email. Colin, let's start with you. Tell us more about Saxophilia, how you came together.
We're a classical saxophone quartet, and the other two members who aren't here today, David Branter and Julia Nolan, were both former professors of mine at UBC when I was studying there as an undergrad. And about, I guess, 3 years after I'd completed my degree, we got together and decided to form a professional quartet with another grad student from UBC at the time. And we've just continued together over the years. We managed to click well as personalities and musical tastes. And Chris joined the group about 10 years ago or so, as our other alto player got too busy with his life and kids. So we've managed to just keep working together and staying connected in the community, doing various performances with local composers and other established groups and presenters. We played with Vancouver Opera back in 2010.
Yeah. And Chris, tell me about this second album then, Metamorphosis.
Well, it's a real passion project for the group. And, we have really had a focus on Canadian new music since really the inception of the group. And so we are featuring composers from all across Canada, but two notably from Vancouver, that's Fred Stride and Dave Branter, but also Quebec composer Beatrice Ferreira, and a composer that lived for many years in Alberta, Violet Archer, who used to teach at the University of Alberta, where I actually got my musical education. So it's a very special album for us, and it contains a wide variety of music that I think will be of interest to all of your listeners.
And can you take me back then to, even before University of Alberta, Chris? When did you feel an interest in music, and how did you learn to play instruments?
Oh, well, my mom propped me up on the piano at age 4, age 5. And so I got the private teaching piano experience.
Uh-huh.
And that was really formative. And I always had an interest in it, although I will say that my true passions took off when I got into junior high and high school, when I was in school bands there, and I switched to saxophone and never looked back. It was just something that became
Wow.
just a core activity for me throughout
Yeah.
the week.
What was
I'm
it
sure
about
the
the
rest of them.
saxophone?
Oh, well, my family always played the sax. My father played the saxophone,
Ah,
and he was from a little town of Eckville in Alberta, and there was a lot of the dance bands back in the day had saxophonists in them, and so it was. I think it was part of the just my upbringing. There was always a saxophone around,
right.
so
It was familiar to you.
that's correct.
Right. And okay. And Colin, what about yourself? I have memories of being propped up at the piano by my grandmother when I was 4 too. But what about for you then, Colin? What do you remember of when you were first introduced to playing music?
Yeah, I'm actually, at least my immediate family, I'm the only musician in contact. My mother told
Ah,
stories about one of her uncles used to playing the saxophone and clarinet, but I just started in school band in grade 9, and saxophone was just sort of, I guess, in the air on the radio. My brother and
right.
I both thought it was the cool thing to play, so that's what I gravitated towards. But I also sang in school choirs when I was young as well, and
Ah.
just kept it up all the way through school until I decided to make a career out of it.
There you go. We actually have a clip of you performing as well at a school. We're going to play it in a moment here, but I'll just put out the phone numbers as well, asking you what difference has learning to play music, perform music, what difference has that made for you? Tell us about what you play, or if you sing, tell us about that and what brought you to it. You can give us a call, 1 800 825 5950, 604 669 3733, or you can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Our email is bctoday@cbc.ca. And my guests are two members of the ensemble Saxophilia, Colin McDonald and Chris Coughlin, who play saxophone. Colin plays baritone saxophone, and Chris plays alto saxophone. We have a clip of them performing with the two other members at the East Vancouver Community Music School. Take a listen and watch this. That is the musical ensemble Saxophilia playing at the East Vancouver Music School. Colin, what does it mean to you to be able to play at a music school and perform at schools?
Well, performing for students is such an important part of the education process. I think probably over half of what I learned as when I was studying as an undergrad at UBC was just learned from sitting in concerts and watching professionals do their thing.
Right.
For us to be able to do that for other groups of students is really important, not only just to demonstrate what we're physically capable of doing on the instrument, but showing in person the communication skills that are involved with live performance, things that you don't get out of a book, but you have to see sort of as the guru experience, sitting at the foot of the master in person.
Yeah, and taking it all in. You know, my son plays trumpet at his school band, the jazz band and the concert band, and he just really loves it. And it's so wonderful for me to watch him on stage at his concerts and groove to the music. It's just, and you're right, he feels that real camaraderie with the band, but as well being able to improvise and do those solos. It's really made a difference for him. And so for you, Chris, what does it mean for you to be able to be that example for students as well?
Oh, it's a long time dream of mine to perform music for people. But I just wanted to go back to Colin's point, and it's not just yes, we perform for young students, but also we have many students who are adult students and people who are retired, and so it's a really it's a lifelong passion, and you can learn for a very long time. I mean, a lot of the people I know retired from their day jobs, and they go right into concert bands or choirs, or jazz bands, all across the Lower Mainland. So to answer your question, it's just a dream to be able to instruct them and be that example for them.
And inspire them. Oh, well, I mean, think about that, being able to, once you retire, I'm going to go back to this part of my life that brought me so much joy, right? I should go back to playing piano and improve as well myself. It can happen even as an adult. Thank you for that reminder. Our numbers are 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 as well. We'd love to hear from you about what it means to you to have learned music, and what difference does music education make? Tell us about the instrument that you play. I'd love to hear from you. Susan is calling us from Surrey. Hi, Susan.
Hello.
Hi. What role has music played in your life?
It has given me a sense of purpose, a sense of pride and joy, just a lot of pleasure.
Wow.
A lot of pleasure to have fun.
When did you learn?
I learned in elementary school that the music teacher taught the whole class the recorder, and as part of that, she taught us to read music. And I grew up above a pub. My parents ran a pub in Wales, and they had a honky-tonk pub piano in the music room. So at the age of 10, I sat myself at the piano and started plunking away. And my mum played, so she showed me the basics.
Oh.
And from there, just persevered. And it's been a pleasure. I didn't play it for some years, raising my children, but I'm retired now and have an electric piano so I can plug it in and use headphones and not disturb the neighbors.
Well, you may want to hold a performance for them at some point. So, Susan, when you were 10, you would walk down to your parents' pub and play on their honky-tonk piano?
Well, we lived above the pub. It was different times back then.
Yeah.
We lived above the pub, so I could actually go and play at any time.
Yeah.
And the joy, the pride for me was my dad always wanted to learn the piano and never did. He originally worked in the mines in Wales and then lied about his age and went into the Royal Air Force just to get out of the mines. So he was busy with Second World War and raising his kids and all that kind of thing. So when I started playing, it was a pride and a joy for him.
Wow.
But my early music was mostly the the church music that my mum had. And then when I became older and worked, I was able to go out and buy the Beatles and the Monkees and the Sound of Music and start playing more fun stuff.
Wow. What a great story, Susan. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Love that. That's a great story from Susan in Surrey. Keep on playing. There you go. Abby is up next now in Burnaby. Hi, Abby. What instrument do you play?
Hi, I'm Abby. I play all kinds of percussion. So I mean, I started out as playing on the piano, and then I got involved in African dance, which brought me to African drumming, and that took me to the World Rhythm Festival, which was held in Seattle every year. And through there, I connected with people who are rhythm facilitators or drum circle facilitators.
Oh, okay.
So I went and trained on how to be a rhythm facilitator. And so now I do this thing where I get people from age 6 to 99 together playing on drums or percussion or buckets or anything that makes a noise. And
what do you do as a rhythm facilitator?
So I guide and direct them.
Yeah.
So I might get them on a simple pulse and then get them to create. Can you add a beat to this?
Right.
Can you, and some people I say, can you subtract from this? And then I'll divide them into so that they could just hear half of what people are playing, so that it gives a good awareness of all the sounds that are going on around you, so that you can appreciate what people do around you. It's sort of like listening to, you have a whole community doing things together, but you don't notice the small voices.
Right. But
And
they
you
all
don't
add up.
notice- Right. And then if you take the small voices away, what does it sound with just the big voices?
Wow,
So to me,
Abby,
it's a community binding thing.
yeah, absolutely. And how many people do you think have been there? What's the biggest crowd you've had in terms of a drum circle?
I've facilitated up to about 300 people.
Oh my gosh. No small task there, huh?
No, it's pretty fun. It's pretty cool. Actually, the more the merrier.
Yeah, I
It's
can
good.
imagine the sound just thunderous. Abby,
Yes.
thank you so much. Really good to hear from you. Rhythm
Thank you.
facilitator. That's a great story. Jen writes us, there are 2 amazing kids and youth choirs in Prince George. We find choir an amazing music experience. It's more affordable than private lessons, and the community you get along with the music is amazing. Marlene writes, I played clarinet in high school for a couple of years. I'm now 70, retired in Campbell River. When I heard this town has a community orchestra, I was inspired to buy a used clarinet and take some lessons. Being part of this is my goal, and with some practice, I may achieve that with time and lots of practice. I'm happy to hear that learning music is the perfect brain food. That is wonderful. Chris, that brings me back to what you said earlier. It's also adults who come back or start learning new instruments. Can you talk to me as we wrap up just about the community that can be created? I mean, 300 people.
Yeah, I mean, that was astounding. I think I've never heard of a rhythm facilitator. I'm glad to have heard about it. That's fantastic. Congratulations. But yeah, in terms of the community, I mean, the Lower Mainland has, I think, one of the richest communities for musicians, for amateur musicians. And it's never surprising to me to hear about a new band or a new choir or a new, musical ensemble here, there, and everywhere. So, for people, they can just, pick up an instrument if they haven't played before, or if they already, have some musical training. It's just a phone call away or even an email away to get involved. And in one of my bands, the Royal City Concert Band, we have about 50 members, and we're always looking for new people. So look us up and come on out.
Come on out and join you. And it's never too late. Listen, congratulations to both of you on your new album, and have fun tomorrow night. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Colin McDonald plays saxophone, baritone sax, and Chris Coughlin plays alto saxophone with Saxophilia. That is it for our show. Thanks so much for all of your calls. I'm Michelle Eliot. Have a great afternoon. Thanks for joining us. Amy Bell will be with you tomorrow.